Welcome back to another episode of the Complete Game Podcast. I'm your host, Casey Guerin, and today we're going to be continuing my rankings and tiers breakdown with my wide receiver rankings and tiers. So if you haven't, please go check out the other episodes. I've done quarterback, tight end, and running back rankings and tiers. Today we're going to finish up those rankings and tiers with wide receivers. If you haven't, also please go check out the live mock draft that I did. I recorded myself doing a mock draft, breaking down some picks. And please, if you haven't, go follow me on Twitter at Casey_G14. I've completed my 2020 draft kit / cheat sheet. I've been giving it away for free. It's rankings, tiers, sleepers, breakout players, rookies, everything you need for your fantasy draft coming up this week if you haven't had it yet. Season's only just about a week away, or 2 weeks away now. We're coming close to the NFL season. Fantasy drafts are happening. Everybody's having their league drafts. So please reach out to me on Twitter. I'll send you the draft kit / cheat sheet. It's free. I've given away over 50 draft kits now. I've sent it to over 50 people. We're coming up on 60, hopefully getting to 75, maybe even 100 before the season starts here in the next few weeks. It's been going extremely well so far. I've had a lot of people ask for it. There's been good feedback on it so far. The cheat sheet has been solid so far based on what other people are saying. I put a lot of time and effort into it. I think I did a really solid job on it. Put a lot of time and effort into it with Tommy Watroba. We collabed on it. We did it together. Made our own cheat sheet for people. Like I said, it's going out. It's been out to over 50 to 60 people now. So please, just send me a message on Twitter or whatever. Contact me. Find a way to reach me. The Complete Game Podcast on YouTube at Casey_G14 on Twitter, Casey Guerin on Facebook. Just please reach out to me whichever way if you want a copy of the draft kit before the season starts, and I'll get it to you. So going right into it with our wide receiver rankings. Like I said in previous episodes, I'm trying to keep these podcasts short so people can listen and listen on your way to work or whatever and don't have to sit and listen for an hour long to hear my take on players and stuff. So we're going to start right away with the number one tier. So the first tier is our elite of the elite wide receivers here. So in my tier one, we have 4 guys. Michael Thomas, obviously, is my number one receiver. Broke the single season reception record. Not much that needs to be said there. Julio Jones, I actually have as my second ranked wide receiver. Remember, these are our PPR rankings. Even in PPR, I would still have Julio Jones as my number 2 ranked receiver. Julio Jones, still on the Falcons. He's only 31 years old. He's not too old yet. Matt Ryan hasn't showed any signs of slowing down. They drafted 2 offensive linemen last year in the first round. They're going to be in their second season. They're going into their second year in the NFL. Matt Ryan's going to have more pass protection. Austin Hooper's gone. Mohamed Sanu's gone. That's opening up way more targets. We don't know if Matt Ryan's going to be able to trust Hayden Hurst right away because he's a new guy. Russell Gage is an unknown kind of stepping into the slot. He had some great games last year, but we don't know if he's good enough to take away targets from Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley. So a lot of the targets are going to go towards Julio's way. I expect another huge year from Julio. Number 3 in the rankings going forward. That's really all I need to say on Julio. Is he could see even more targets this year. Him and Ridley could see a little uptick in targets this year. And Matt Ryan could be more efficient as a passer with a better offensive line. 3, I have Davante Adams. The Packers didn't draft any wide receivers in the draft this year, even though there was almost 40 receivers selected in the draft. Adams is going to be the number 1 for Aaron Rodgers again, and he could lead the league in targets. There is a very good chance he leads the league in targets. There's really nobody else there. Allen Lazard, who I like a lot. But other than that, there's really nobody else. And then number 4, Tyreek Hill. Unbelievable speed, number 1 option for Pat Mahomes. Nothing much else to say there. And then right there, I have my tier break. So those guys are guys that are going for like 1,400 yards-ish in that area. That's their ceiling, is like 1,500 yards. That's kind of their ceiling, and they almost have a floor at this point in their careers of like 1,100, 1,200 yards. All those guys kind of have a floor there as long as they're healthy and play a full season. So there's kind of a tier break for me there. So going into the second tier, for tier 2 guys, let me explain this in a way that makes sense. So these tier 2 are guys that I would be happy to have as my first receiver on my roster in fantasy. So you're going through your draft, you're going through your fantasy draft, and you come across these guys, and these guys I would be happy to have them as my first wide receiver if I don't get Thomas, Julio, Adams, or Hill. So starting off this tier is Chris Godwin. Chris Godwin, my number 5 wide receiver overall. Tom Brady loves throwing to the slot position. Chris Godwin had a huge breakout year last year, 1,300 yards, 9 touchdowns, 120 targets, 86 receptions. Hopefully Brady just peppers him with targets. Hopefully he can go over 100 receptions this year. He missed the last couple games of the season last year due to an injury. Could have gotten to 100 catches, but hopefully he can get it this year. I have Chris Godwin 5th ranked, which is pretty high. But like I said, Tom Brady loves the slot. He's going to pepper the slot with targets, and I think Chris Godwin is the beneficiary of that. And then DJ Moore, I expect a huge year out of at 6. DJ Moore gets Teddy Bridgewater, one of the most accurate quarterbacks in the NFL. Teddy Bridgewater is super accurate, and they're going to be losing a lot. DJ Moore is the entrenched number 1 wide receiver there. So when a super fast, super dynamic player like DJ Moore gets an accurate quarterback, all Bridgewater has to do is put the ball accurately right into DJ Moore's hands, and then DJ Moore can do the rest, make some big plays happen after the catch. I think DJ Moore is set to have a huge, huge season this year, absolutely ginormous season. I'm drafting him everywhere, late 2nd round, early 3rd round, no matter what. I'm pushing the button on DJ Moore. I think he's going to have an absolute monster season this year. 7th, I have DeAndre Hopkins. 8th, I have Allen Robinson. And honestly, looking at this, I might switch this around. So looking at like Odell Beckham last year, when you see guys change teams, you're looking at like when guys change teams, they have to learn a whole new offense. They have to establish new rapport with the new quarterback. And like you saw with Odell last year, it's tough to establish rapport right away with a new quarterback. It's tough to develop that connection, and especially with little training camp or preseason games or anything like that. Hopkins and Murray really haven't had time to establish any sort of connection. I still think Hopkins is going to get a ton of targets, but I really don't think Hopkins' ceiling is as high as everybody thinks in this offense. If you watched last year, you saw the way they ran the offense. They're trying to spread the ball around in Arizona. You're going to see they do have some talent on the roster with Christian Kirk, Andy Isabella, Larry Fitzgerald. You're going to see the targets kind of spread around a little bit, and you're probably going to see that Hopkins could still lead the team in targets. He probably will lead the team in targets, but the ball's going to be spread around a lot. I don't know what the ceiling is for Hopkins on a new team where there's some other weapons around. And then Robinson, I'm considering moving him up in front of Hopkins here, because with Allen Robinson, Taylor Gabriel is gone, so that's another receiver gone. So really it's just him and Anthony Miller, which means all the targets are going to Allen Robinson and Anthony Miller. A few to Tariq Cohen every game. But David Montgomery is dealing with a groin injury right now. And if you think about it, Allen Robinson is actually going to have the best quarterback play of his career so far, which is relative. But in college, he had Christian Hackenberg. He had Blake Bortles in Jacksonville. He's had Mitch Trubisky in Chicago. And I don't think you can debate that Nick Foles is better than all those guys. So once Nick Foles is named the starter, Allen Robinson is going to have the best quarterback of his career. And what he's been able to do with the quarterbacks that he has had is unbelievable. So he's getting a slight uptick in quarterback play. If you watch Nick Foles play with the Eagles the last couple of years, he made Alshon Jeffrey relevant. So I think Allen Robinson is a lot better than Alshon Jeffrey. So Nick Foles likes to target his wide receivers a little bit more than kind of Carson Wentz did. Carson Wentz kind of likes to target the tight ends. But in the playoffs and when we did see Nick Foles play in Philly, he did target Alshon Jeffrey and those outside wide receivers a lot. So you have Allen Robinson getting a slight upgrade in quarterback play, and he's going to get a ton of extra targets this year with David Montgomery injured and Taylor Gabriel out of town, because I think the third wide receiver at this point is like Cordell Patterson or Javon Wims or guys like that who really aren't – they're really not just like wide receivers who are going to be on the field the whole time. Like Patterson plays some running back. He's kind of a gadget player. So Robinson's going to be the number one every single game. He's going to see a ton of targets this year. I wouldn't doubt that he is one of the NFL leaders in targets this year either. And then rounding out this tier is Kenny Galladay and Amari Cooper. Galladay has Stafford. He puts the ball into traffic. He's going to throw the ball downfield. He's going to chuck it and give Galladay a chance to make plays. Galladay's one of the best contested catch receivers in the league. He can go up and get it. He's going to get downfield targets. He's probably going to score a lot of touchdowns again. And if Matthew Stafford is healthy, Kenny Galladay could be one of the top receivers in fantasy this year. Amari Cooper, just like I've said about Dak Prescott, this year Dak Prescott's pass attempts went up. They're going more towards a passing team instead of a running team. Dak Prescott's super accurate. They have a good offensive line. They play on turf. And you should see Amari Cooper have another huge year this year. He's a little bit of a boomer bust guy. He has some huge weeks. He has some down weeks, mostly at home. He has huge games at home in prime time. I don't really have any stats on that, but just from what I've watched, I try and watch all the games in the NFL, all the games I've watched over the last few years with Cooper in Dallas, is that Cooper at home with Dak, and even in prime time, is a huge deal. They make some big things happen, and I still would be happy to have Cooper as my number one receiver this year. With Gallup and CeeDee Lamb in town now. Well, Gallup was there, but now with CeeDee Lamb, you have 3 elite wide receivers, and I'm not really worried about Cooper getting targets stolen away or anything. Cooper's going to be on the field all the time. I still think there's a ton of potential there. And Cooper's kind of where the tier ends on guys I'd be happy with as my number one wideout. And that goes to the next tier with Mike Evans starting off the next tier, tier 3. So tier 3 are kind of those elite guys who I'd take as my number 2 wide receiver. So I really wouldn't be super happy taking these guys as my first receiver in fantasy. I would like it if they were my second guy. If they were my second receiver, I'd be extremely happy. So Mike Evans, the only reason I'm not high on Mike Evans right now is because Tom Brady the last few years, his yards per attempt is going down. He's throwing the ball shorter. Maybe that's because he didn't have field stretching deep play receivers like Mike Evans. So I could be wrong. Mike Evans could still be really great in fantasy football. But just looking at the numbers, Brady's yards per attempt has gone down. He's throwing more towards the slot. He's throwing shorter passes, dumping off to running backs, and Mike Evans is the complete opposite player of that. He's looking for downfield targets, and he's getting the ball deep. Next, Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp. I have them back-to-back. I have Woods higher this year, even though Kupp finished higher last year, final overall finish. But I like Woods a lot this year. Woods and Kupp. Also, like I've said on other podcasts, where you're going to see the Rams run more 12 personnel this year with 2 tight ends on the field now that Brandon Cooks is gone. And last year, kind of when you saw Cooks either injured or not playing that much or out of the lineup or banged up, you saw Woods absolutely explode at the end of the year, and you saw Kupp kind of take a back seat. Kupp had a huge first half, and Woods had that solid, stable first half like he always does. He's always consistent. He's one of the most consistent wide receivers in fantasy football. But then that second half, you saw him blow up once they went towards more 12 personnel, when it's just Kupp and Woods on the field. Kupp is more of a slot guy. Woods can play all over, and I think Woods is going to be the number one option now, and I think Woods is going to get way more targets than Kupp this year. And I would love Robert Woods as my second wide receiver. Woods and Evans are extremely close to going up towards that second tier where I'd be happy with them as my number one wide receiver, but they're not quite there yet. Like I said, next we have Cooper Kupp. And then at rank 14, I have Adam Thielen. So Stephon Diggs is gone. Adam Thielen is the number one option there in Minnesota. He plays outside. He plays in the slot, mostly in the slot. He's going to be the safety blanket for Kirk Cousins. Even though Minnesota just picked up Yannick Ngakoue, their secondary still isn't that great. They have bad cornerback play. They have one of the worst cornerback stables in the NFL. So if they're giving up points, if they're trailing, they're going to be throwing a lot. Kirk Cousins is going to have to throw the ball a lot to keep them in games. Adam Thielen's still going to see a ton of targets, and now he really doesn't have that much target competition other than second-year man Olabisi Johnson and rookie Justin Jefferson. And then we have Odell, Juju Smith-Schuster, and Devontae Parker. So Odell, Juju, and Parker are kind of these veterans that we know that they can produce at a high level, but there's still some question marks here. Odell had a bad year last year. There was no rapport with Baker Mayfield. We're hoping for a bounce-back year. We know the talent's there. Still have him ranked pretty high, top 15, but I wouldn't be taking him as my first receiver this year. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know if the upside's still there. And I really am not taking Odell in the third, early fourth round of my fantasy drafts when I could be taking some other guys in that area who I like a lot more, like Robert Woods, guys like that. So with Odell, I mean, you can take him, but I'm not really too high on him. We don't know. The upside is there, but they're going to run the ball a ton this year. Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. I wasn't sure. I'm not sure if it's a coach or a beat reporter came out and said they want to give Hunt and Chubb like 15 touches a game each, which doesn't leave a lot of room for Odell and Landry to get a lot of work in. So I don't know about Odell. The talent's there, obviously, but we're going to have to kind of see if they can put it together this year. Juju, not much that needs to be said there. There's huge upside. If Big Ben is healthy, if Big Ben's elbow is healthy, Juju could go back to being one of the top wide receivers in fantasy football. But now that we have seen Juju Smith-Schuster with another quarterback, and we saw him play really awful, just not good at all with these other quarterbacks, which obviously the Mason Rudolph and Duck Hodges are not very good quarterbacks. They aren't great, and that had a lot to do with it too. That had a lot to do with Juju not playing well last year. But with Big Ben coming off a serious elbow injury, that doesn't mean Big Ben's going to be healthy all year. So if we kind of factor in and we kind of keep that scenario open where Big Ben might not play the whole season and Mason Rudolph or Duck Hodges has to go out there and play again, then Juju is going to be an immediate sell candidate. You might not even be able to start Juju based on what we saw last year. So it's a realistic possibility. It's a possible outcome that Big Ben isn't ready or just kind of hit that cliff around 40 years old now. It's possible he's not healthy or he hits the cliff or whatever. So there is some question marks with Juju. The upside's there for him too, but I'm not really buying in the third and fourth round. Like I said, the upside is there. He could be a top receiver in fantasy, but the question marks with Big Ben right now is just too much for me to buy Juju. And then the tier finishes with Devontae Parker, who I actually love this season. He's been battling an injury in camp this week, but I love Parker a lot. Allen Hurns opted out. Albert Wilson opted out. Preston Williams coming off an ACL tear. All the reasons I love Mike Gesicki. It's pretty much just going to be Parker and Gesicki until Preston Williams can show that he's 100% back and healthy again. So Parker's going to see a ton of targets from Ryan Fitzpatrick. Ryan Fitzpatrick's not afraid to throw the ball into traffic. Parker, if he's healthy, if he's on the field, he's going to see a ton of targets this year. He's going to get those balls from Ryan Fitzpatrick where he's going to go up, where he's going to get the chance to go up and make a big play. I expect Parker to get a lot of targets this year. He's going in like the 5th or 6th round, and at that point, you're almost getting him as your 3rd or 4th wide receiver in that point in your draft. And I'm 100% happy with him being my 2nd receiver, even though he's going pretty late, 5th or 6th round, because I think the targets are going to be there. And with Fitzpatrick, we know he's going to get the chance to make some big plays. So as long as he's healthy, there's really not much target competition there. I think he's going to get heavily targeted, especially downfield. So I like Devontae Parker a lot this season. Going into the next tier, we have A.J. Brown. So A.J. Brown burst onto the scene last year as a rookie. Huge yak monster, yards after catch. And I'm going to start picking up the pace a little bit here to not make this podcast go very long. So tier 4, we're starting with A.J. Brown. We have above average 2nd receivers with upside. So these aren't these Evans, Woods, Kupp, kind of Odell, elite 2nd guys I want. These are guys that have some upside as my 2nd wide receiver, but they're not quite in that tier with those other guys. Like Evans, number 1 wide receiver on his team. Woods, number 1 wide receiver on his team. Odell, like those guys are pretty much the alphas on their team. But then you have these other guys like A.J. Brown, Calvin Ridley. We have Lockett, Chark, McLaurin, Metcalf, Cortland Sutton. So like these guys, they could be alphas too. Like A.J. Brown's the alpha on his team, but we just don't know if the pass volume is going to be there. They're going to hand the ball a lot off to Derrick Henry. We don't know if the targets are going to be there, but if they are, A.J. Brown is an absolute smash in fantasy this year. I love A.J. Brown, the player. We just don't know if the targets are going to be there, and that's kind of why he's in this 4th tier, this above average 2nd receiver. And what I mean by 2nd receiver is like I said, with the above tier, just guys that I want to take as my second receiver, not really as my first receiver, but guys I would be pretty happy with to have as my second receiver on my roster during my fantasy draft. So A.J. Brown, Ridley's in this tier. I don't think Ridley and Brown really belong with the Jujus and Odells and Thielens and Woods and Evanses yet. They could be in the future if Ridley breaks out this year. If A.J. Brown has another big year this year, they could move way up in the rankings. Tyler Lockett, boomer bust player. We don't know if the pass volume is going to be there. Seahawks love to run the ball. If they get ahead in games, they kind of shut Russell Wilson down. So the pass volume really isn't going to be there all the time. But he is going to have those huge weeks still. That's going to make him one of the top receivers in fantasy, at least top 24, something along the lines of that. I have him 20th, so yeah, like top 24. He's going to have those huge weeks. And then we have Chark, DJ Chark, one of my biggest breakout players this year. Had an unbelievable season last year. Gets another year with Gardner Minshew. The offensive line takes another step forward. They're pretty much returning everyone on offense. So another year with Minshew to develop and to develop that rapport. I like Chark a ton this year. McLaurin is the other big breakout receiver this year. He's going to get a ton of targets in Washington. He's really the only receiving threat there. So he's going to get peppered with targets. And then we have Metcalf and Sutton. So DK Metcalf really came on at the end of the year last year. Obviously, he has great downfield playmaking ability, but he really only runs kind of one or two routes. He just runs deep or runs slants and tries to bully the ball from other guys. And like I said with Lockett, I have Metcalf lower because we've seen Russell Wilson and Tyler Lockett have that chemistry for a couple of years now, where we've only seen Russell Wilson and Metcalf for the back half of one season. So for now, Metcalf is 23rd, and then Sutton we have 24th, ending tier 4. So Sutton had a big year last year too. He's going into his third season. He has true alpha potential. He can be one of these guys in this tier that jumps next season. So really in this tier, above average guys that I take as my second receiver with upside. So really all the guys in this tier, Brown, Ridley, Lockett, Chark, McLaurin, Metcalf, Sutton, really all of them have the ability to jump to that next tier above or even higher in 2021 if they have big years this year. Sutton could become an elite fantasy wide receiver this year. Hopefully with all these weapons that they got, they're not stealing targets from him, and they're kind of just drawing defenders away instead of stealing targets with all the guys that they've added. And obviously it relies on Drew Lock. So another thing with this tier is that these guys kind of have a little bit of a question mark, except for really Calvin Ridley. Calvin Ridley has the quarterback play. He's on the right team and the right offense, but he doesn't belong up in that upper tier yet, with Julio Jones still there, taking a lot of targets away. But Ridley's definitely going to have a big season this year. And I like all these guys in this tier. They all have upside to move up. They're just not ready yet to move up, and they could move way up in the rankings in 2021 if they have a big year this year in 2020. So tier 5, starting it off at rank 25, is kind of middle tier second receivers. Guys I'm okay with having as my second wide receiver, but I'm not going to be too thrilled about it. I'd be more happy having these guys as my third wideout on my team, like second or third wideout or flex, depending on what kind of league you play in. So we have Keenan Allen. With Mike Williams injured right now, Keenan Allen's going to be the number one target again. But we don't have Phillip Rivers kind of slinging the ball around into traffic, throwing the ball to Keenan Allen no matter what. We have Tyrod Taylor now, who's one of those quarterbacks that's really only going to throw the ball if Keenan Allen is open. Keenan Allen is a really good route runner, so we expect that Keenan Allen is still going to have a solid year just because we know he can get open. We know he's good at running routes and getting open and getting separation. But with Tyrod Taylor at quarterback, you're not going to see him take those chances and throw the ball into traffic and throw those tight window balls to Keenan Allen. So with Tyrod can run a little bit too. So if plays break down, Tyrod could run. He can run for a first down. And really with Keenan Allen this year, we just don't know if the targets are going to be there. He's still the number one option. We've seen Tyrod Taylor make Sammy Watkins go over 1,000 yards. So we have seen Tyrod be able to support a fantasy wide receiver, but we just don't know what the upside is for Keenan Allen. I don't think there really is any upside. I think the floor is still there, but with Tyrod at quarterback, there really is no ceiling. He's still the number one. He's still going to get targets. But with Tyrod, they're going to be safer targets. He's not going to throw the ball into traffic. And it remains to be seen when Justin Herbert takes over what Herbert is going to do or how he is with Keenan Allen. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. And then we have Landry, who had another great season last year. Landry's turning into one of the most consistent players in fantasy football. I love Landry as my third wide receiver, not really my second, but I wouldn't mind if I had Landry as my second wide receiver. If I'm taking running backs early, like I do in most of my drafts, I'd be happy with Landry here, Tyler Boyd, Stephon Diggs, T.Y. Hilton, Julian Edelman, A.J. Green. Guys like Landry and Boyd are going to be catch monsters. Diggs is going to have some big weeks getting those deep balls from Josh Allen. I think Diggs is going to be kind of hit or miss, boom or bust a little bit, but he is going to have those huge boom weeks. T.Y. Hilton with Rivers. T.Y. Hilton's getting older now, but I still think T.Y. Hilton is going to have a solid season, but I'm not drafting him as my number one, number two really receiver that that we all used to have in fantasy, especially with Andrew Luck back in T.Y. Hilton's prime when he was kind of a number one wide receiver or a high tier number two wide receiver. And then Julian Edelman, we don't know what he's going to be with Cam Newton, but you figure he's kind of the best receiver on the team still, so he's still going to get a ton of targets. And then A.J. Green, I would be super happy with as my third wide receiver, but I would still take him as my second wide receiver right now. I honestly, now that I'm doing this podcast, I'm thinking about moving him down into the next tier, because I really wouldn't feel comfortable with A.J. Green as my second receiver right now. So I think I'm going to move him down to the next tier, which the next tier is tier 6, startable third wide receivers. So these are guys that are definitely going to be like your third wide receiver starting, your flex options, or maybe the first wide receiver off your bench if you're only starting 2 wide receivers. And that starts at rank 32. Will Fuller, huge upside. He can have huge weeks. He can have some of the biggest weeks in fantasy football, but he's really a flex option. We don't know if we're going to be able to start him every week. We don't know what he is when he's the alpha number one receiver. We don't know what the targets are going to be like, but we do know there's going to be some big weeks with Deshaun Watson. So that's why he kind of starts off this tier, because he's still a highly coveted fantasy option. He's still going to put up some huge weeks and some big numbers, but he's kind of that third receiver. We have Michael Gallup. Michael Gallup had like 1,100 yards last year in a great offense. I think what I'm trying to say here is I don't love Michael Gallup because of CeeDee Lamb, but I do think that Michael Gallup is still going to be a solid fantasy option. I wouldn't mind starting Gallup as my third wide receiver. I'll plug him into my flex spot every week. If he's getting 1,100 yards, that means he is for sure a startable guy. That means for sure you can start him in your flex, maybe even wide receiver 2. And then we have Marquise Brown. Marquise Brown, absolute speedster, added like 20 pounds of muscle this offseason, could be the guy that moves way up into this tier. But these fast guys that have some down weeks and some boom weeks, I'm not really starting with confidence as my wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2. So Brown, I wouldn't start anything more than a flex unless we see a steady dose of targets and if he's producing consistently every week. But I don't know if he will. That remains to be seen. Christian Kirk. Love Christian Kirk as a breakout player this year. Third season. Gets another year with Kyler Murray in that Kingsbury offense. DeAndre Hopkins taking the coverage away. Jamison Crowder, number 1 option for Darnold at this point. Sterling Shepard, number 1 option for Daniel Jones. Marvin Jones, number 2 option for Matt Stafford at this point. Like I said, Matt Stafford not afraid to throw the ball downfield, put the ball into traffic. So Jones is still going to see a decent amount of targets every week. Brandon Cooks. I'm not really starting Cooks as my 1 or 2 wide receiver at all. I don't love Cooks this year, but I don't hate him either, especially with Fuller's injury history. I'm kind of staying away from Cooks just because of the concussion history. But if we know anything about Cooks is that we've actually seen him play an alpha role in the NFL. We've seen him be the number 1 wide receiver for the Saints, for the Patriots. We've seen it happen, so I still think there's some potential for Cooks this year if he can stay healthy. But one hit could kind of end his season or his career. Then we have John Brown. John Brown's still going to be startable this year, but the targets really aren't going to be as high with Diggs now in town. There's not going to be as much potential for touchdowns. Anthony Miller, who, like I said earlier with Allen Robinson, Anthony Miller could have a solid season. There's really not much upside there. I'm not starting him as my second receiver, but he could be a flex option all season long if he does get those targets from Nick Foles. Mike Williams, big bully outside receiver. Don't really love him this year with Tyrod. Could be a mid-season trade guy towards the end of the season, midway point through your fantasy season. Mike Williams could be one of the biggest trade guys to go get if Justin Herbert takes over and Justin Herbert kind of throws the ball into traffic and is throwing those jump balls up for grab to Mike Williams. Mike Williams might be a speculative trade candidate about halfway through the year. And then we have Golden Tate, who is the slot option in New York. Daniel Jones likes to throw the ball around a lot too. He puts the ball into traffic. He has some dangerous throws he makes. And Golden Tate could benefit. He could be 10, 12 point a week guy, just that not really, there's no real upside there. He's not going to score a lot of touchdowns, but he can have some decent weeks here and there. He can be consistent, 5 catches, 50 yards every week, something like that. So he could potentially be your third wide receiver flex option, especially in deeper leagues. And that's really where I break the tier. So now we're going into tier 7. Tier 7 are wide receivers that are going to be on your bench who have some upside. We start at rank 44 with N'Keal Harry. N'Keal Harry going to be on the field all the time now this year. New England Patriots first round pick from last year. Harry hasn't been doing very well in camp, but who knows, maybe Cam Newton likes him. Cam Newton likes to throw the ball into traffic as well, so maybe he does trust N'Keal Harry and throws him those 50-50 balls a lot this year. But there is some upside there with the first round draft capital on the Patriots. Sammy Watkins I have here. Sammy Watkins is still the number 2 wide receiver for Patrick Mahomes. Despite what we've seen over the last few years, Sammy Watkins has disappointed, obviously, but Sammy Watkins is going in one of the last rounds of everyone's draft here. He's going in the late rounds, and you're getting the Chiefs number 2 wide receiver late in your draft. So that's a huge value there, and if he stinks, you can just drop him or whatever too. We have Deshaun Jackson, who's hopefully healthy. One huge week last year until he got injured, but he could have some huge weeks with Carson Wentz this year if he stays healthy. We have Darius Slayton, had some huge weeks last year. Deontay Johnson I have here. Allen Lazard, Preston Williams, Jalen Reagor, Paris Campbell, Brandon Ayuk, James Washington, CeeDee Lamb, Mecole Hardman, Henry Ruggs, Curtis Samuel, Brashad Perriman. So all these guys kind of have some upside. They have a trait or some speed or something about them, or they're going to get targets, or their quarterback or something. They have some sort of trait that has upside, but they're not good. They're not either not good enough, or we haven't seen enough for them to be starting wide receivers in fantasy. But there's some trait that we like about them that gives them some upside. Like Deontay Johnson last year produced unbelievably with Mason Rudolph and Duck Hodges. So if Big Ben's healthy, then that means Deontay Johnson could have a big year. Same thing with James Washington. Just to highlight some other guys here, Jalen Reagor just got hurt in camp, out 2 to 4 weeks, but he was having a huge camp with Carson Wentz. Allen Lazard, probably my favorite late round wide receiver target this year, number 2 receiver for Aaron Rodgers. That has a ton of upside to it if you're the number 2 for Aaron Rodgers. Paris Campbell going to be the slot option for Phillip Rivers. So Keenan Allen played a lot in the slot, and Paris Campbell runs his 40-yard dash time like 3 or 4 tenths of a second faster than Keenan Allen. So Paris Campbell has blazing speed, and Phillip Rivers is going to get this guy in the slot that's extremely fast. So I like Campbell in year 2. Brandon Ayuk is currently the number 1 receiver for the 49ers, actually, with all their injuries. CeeDee Lamb, rookie. Mecole Hardman, I'm not a huge fan of. Ruggs, rookie. Curtis Samuel, we don't know what the targets are going to be like yet, but he's super fast. He has some upside too. And then Brashad Perriman, we saw some big things last year, and he could be the number 2 option for Sam Darnold, who also likes to throw the ball into traffic. Could be the number 2 option there. And then that brings us into our last tier, tier 8, which is tier 8 is just everybody else in the rankings. So we have rank 60 to rank 80. So we have Hunter Renfrow, safe option slot guy. Randall Cobb, safe option slot guy. Corey Davis, number 2 on his team. Larry Fitzgerald, no real upside at all, but could have some startable weeks. Robbie Anderson, just a deep threat as of now. Don't know how he's going to factor into the offense. Steven Sims, number 2 wide receiver in Washington. Cole Beasley, slot option in Buffalo. Emmanuel Sanders, not high on him. He's getting old now, has been battling injuries. He's going to have some big weeks, but you're not going to know when to start him. So you can't really start him in any week. D.D. Westbrook hasn't shown us anything in his time in the league. Tyrell Williams I have here, who actually just got named out for the year. So ignore Tyrell Williams. Alshon Jeffrey, probably going to start the year on the PUP list. He's going to be injured again. Russell Gage and Mohamed Sanu I have back-to-back here. Gage is going to be the starting slot receiver for Atlanta, so there could be some value there. Sanu, still in New England, could be some value there if Cam Newton shows that he likes Sanu. We have Marquez Valdes-Scantling, who I don't like, but still the downfield deep threat option for Aaron Rodgers. Traquan Smith could be a breakout year 3 guy this year. Step on the field, step into that Ted Ginn role for the Saints, and have some huge weeks with Drew Brees. That's a good offense to be in if Emmanuel Sanders gets hurt or something in his older age. We've seen Sanders battle injuries the last few years, so if Sanders gets injured, Traquan Smith would be the number 2 receiver for Drew Brees, so keep an eye on him. We have Zach Pascal, who, if Michael Pittman Jr. in Indianapolis doesn't produce right away or can't acclimate to the league right away, you could see Pascal go in, provide some solid weeks. He was kind of a DFS play last year when he was the number 1 option. Philip Dorsett we have here, speedster in Seattle. Probably not going to get many targets, but could have some decent weeks. Miles Boykin, one of my favorite sleepers this year. He's extremely athletic. He really didn't do anything as a rookie, but he's extremely athletic. He has a great athletic profile and could be the number 2 option this year, other than Marquise Brown and Mark Andrews. So really the number 3 option, but the number 2 receiver for Lamar Jackson and one of the most explosive offenses in the league. We have KJ Hamler here, the rookie in Denver, who has great speed, with Drew Lock, who's a good deep ball quarterback, big arm. Auden Tate here. Auden Tate, if he sees the field at all, Auden Tate could be... We saw him actually have some huge weeks last year. He's great in contested catch situations in Cincinnati. If somehow he can break onto the field or things break right for him and he can start, he could provide some fantasy value. And then at rank 80 here, I just threw Demarcus Robinson on there because Demarcus Robinson, if Sammy Watkins gets injured or Tyreek Hill gets injured, could see significant snaps in the Chiefs offense. So there it is, tiers 1 through 8, my wide receiver rankings 1 through 80. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out on Twitter at Casey_G14. Please give me a follow and reach out if you want this ultimate draft kit, which I am basically reading off of right now. I'm reading off the wide receiver rankings and tiers that I made, and there's plenty of other pages on here, so please reach out on Twitter if you do want that draft kit. Thanks for listening. Talk to you next time.